It is not uncommon on social media or even the YouTube comments to find people, we talked the last time about how there's a spectrum of belief, and on the more atheistic side, you have the average person who just simply does not believe in God, but you have a very large and probably not really self-aware demographic of people who are really anti-theist. These are the kind of people that you see in the comment section of YouTube videos, Facebook posts, Instagram, who have these very derogatory, very much with the intention of annoying and poking at and really making a statement towards theistic believers. I don't believe in the invisible sky, Daddy. I'm sorry. Or things like, it's very much what you see in a lot of cartoon shows. For example, on The Simpsons, on Family Guy, on South Park, and a lot of mainstream media. The whole idea of God, specifically the theistic God, is this old man, with a big beard, living in the clouds. He has like a big white robe. Maybe he has a halo around his head. And whenever he gets angry, you see these lightning bolts coming out of his fingers. And, he has like this latch that decides whether someone goes to heaven or to hell. And so when someone comes to me and says, I don't believe in God, I think it's a very important question to ask, well, which God exactly? We discussed last time how, there's the whole spectrum of belief, and even on the theistic side, there is a variety. Because there are people who, like I mentioned before, that they believe that there is some sort of creator out there, but they're not entirely sure what or who this being is. And then, of course, you have on the very far side, the theist that strongly believes in a personal God, who has established moral order, physical order, everything that exists in our universe by him and for him. And so, you have this variety of belief on both sides, and that's why it is so important to ask that question: what exactly do you believe? And if they're the kind of person that rejects belief in God, on the atheistic side, well, which God exactly are you rejecting? This is something that I touched a little bit on last time, near the very end of the last video when we were talking about the spectrum of belief. Not a lot of people really, when they come down to it, when you have, a one-on-one discussion with them, not arguing, just talking, many people will not have an issue with the idea of there being some sort of higher power, some sort of intelligent designer or creator. People are more willing to believe, that aliens, some sort of, extraterrestrial being or beings, created the world and established life on this planet. And then, from there, evolution spread, and here we are today. I believe if anybody's going to be intellectually honest, wherever they see information, they automatically assume the existence of a mind. So when you talk to even to the average atheist, you say, are we really here by chance? Or is there something out there that at the very least, if they're not interacting with us now, did someone, knock over the first domino? When it really comes down to it, the honest average atheist will say, if I'm going to be consistent, there's got to be something. There's got to be some sort of first cause. That is not what most people object to. The God that most people are rejecting, that your average atheist and anti-theist is objecting to, is a theistic, personal God. But why is that? Why are more people inclined to believe in a creator, a designer, or a thing, and then all of a sudden they become uncomfortable and they become very defensive at the notion of a personal being? What is the main difference between those two? Really, it's this. And like I said in my very first video of this YouTube channel, I wanted to make apologetics easy for anybody to understand. And there is, if you go on Google right now, or even up here to search another video here on YouTube, you'll find loads of videos with different, very sophisticated, very detailed, very well thought out arguments for the existence of God. And I recommend you check them out. But something that is very easy for, the average person to remember is very simply this. I argue first, like I mentioned last time, if I want to convince an atheist about my faith, I first try to convince them, well, is there a God? I want to basically first convert them into a deist. And that is not too difficult. That, the whole deistic argument can be made simply from the argument from design. Like I mentioned before, NASA is still exploring the world, and they're not only the world, but the whole universe, and they're trying to discover new life, new planets, new galaxies, new stars. And if they were to find something that resembled ancient ruins on a distant planet similar to Pluto, the automatic assumption from, the vast majority of people on this planet would be there is some sort of life out there. Oh, but we didn't see any creatures. We didn't see any aliens. We don't see, we don't have any real evidence for life. They'll say, okay, maybe they're not there now, but at some point, it could have been thousands or millions of years ago, there was some sort of intelligent life form that lived on this planet. And the same thing applies to the whole idea of a writing system. What if they found something resembling hieroglyphics, or even just a series of patterns or shapes? Like, what if they found triangles or squares or something, something very simple? It doesn't make any sense to us now, but it doesn't really have to. It proves right off the bat that there was some sort of intelligent life on that planet at some point in history. For someone to say, well, we've never seen these beings, we have no clear evidence of them being there. What do you mean there is no evidence? Wherever you see information, what logically follows is that there is a mind of some sort. And you may never find out who these alien beings were, what they looked like, what language they spoke, if any, what was the purpose of them building these structures, or what the writing system was supposed to say. You don't have to know all that. You just automatically assume that these beings existed. And yet there is a double standard when it comes to this world. On any other planet where you see information, people will assume a mind. But somehow on this planet, when you see information, just in one person, and you just look at the DNA of one single person, well, not even a person, just you can go down to the molecular level, go down to the cellular level, and you can see the complex nature, this amazing thing called DNA. Why is it so hard and so difficult and such a wrestle for people to accept, just the possibility that there is a mind behind that? People will not really object to a creator, but there is something that triggers the human heart and the human mind when you include a personal being. So what is this God exactly that we're talking about? That is what we're going to discuss in a couple of future videos. But very simply, for anybody who's out there, whether you're a Christian, an atheist, or a thinker, a free thinker, an agnostic, this is something that you really should think about. Even if you're a Christian, maybe this is something that you've never really thought about before. Do I really believe in my Christian faith? Do I believe that there is a God just because someone told me? Or do I have a good reason to believe that there is something out there? You want to call this being a higher power, you want to call it God, you want to call it aliens, call it what you want. But I think if anybody is going to be intellectually honest, they will be diving in, not to the question of, are we here by accident or is there a designer? But rather the question, who or what is this designer? For starters, I believe that it would be very wise to ask the question of, well, what exactly are we looking for in this designer, in this creator, being, whatever you want to call it? Well, look at the components of our universe. Anybody will tell you that there are 4 main things from which everything else in the universe stems from: time, space, matter, and energy. Everything that exists in our universe falls into at least one of these categories, and these 4 things work together. Something very cool from the Christian perspective actually comes from the very first verse of the Bible. If you're a Christian, you may have never even realized this. Almost everybody knows the very first verse of the Bible, which goes, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Even if you're not a Christian, now, bingo, you've read page 1 of the Bible. Good job. And so, we said something very interesting. Most scholars will agree that the book of Genesis, which is where this verse is found in, was written by Moses approximately between 4 and 5,000 years ago. We don't know the exact date. But something very interesting for someone that lived in that time without, the scientific knowledge, or even the scientific method that we have to this very day. There's something very interesting in that very first verse. We have these components because he says, "in the beginning." So, beginning is time. God created. Created is a verb, which means it's an action. and action requires energy. The heavens, space, and the earth matter. So if we're looking for this creator, this designer, whatever you wish to call it, I think it is safe to assume that we would have to assume a being that if this being created energy, then he must be superior to energy. He must be all powerful. If this being created time, then this being must be outside of time, timeless or eternal. If this being created space, then this being must be spaceless. So, what would the word be for that? He would be maximally great. If he is spaceless, then you cannot contain this being. You cannot, look at him under a microscope. This is an immaterial being, going rightfully with the next one. If this being created matter, then this being must be superior to all matter. This being must be immaterial. So you have an immaterial being, what the Bible would call spirit. Doesn't fall into any of the categories, because one more thing I'm going to mention. Within the category of matter, everything in the universe exists in another 4 states. You learned this probably in elementary school. Solids, liquids, gases, and the 4th one that a lot of people forget is plasma. Plasma is the kind of material that you see stars being made of, like fire, flames. Spirit is an immaterial thing and therefore does not fit into any of the categories. So this being who created all of the solids, liquids, gases, and plasmas in our universe, therefore must be an immaterial being that is infinitely powerful, that has infinite knowledge in order to create everything and all the information that we see in our world. And this being must be eternal. So therefore, this being cannot have a beginning and cannot have an end. The reason why I mention this is because one of the most common objections that I hear a lot of people have for God is, well, if if universe was created by God, then who created God? Look, if you have this line, almost like a domino effect of, something needing to create the next thing, nothing will ever be created. Because if you're expecting, this infinite God to then be created, then a being above this God, therefore becomes God. No, but then this God has to be created, so now the next one over has to be God. The maximally great being is the first cause, is the one who pushed the first domino. And so this being cannot be created. By definition, the God, the true creator of the universe, the designer, whatever you wish to call him, has to be an uncreated being, what we would call a necessary being in order for anything else to exist in the universe. And so this is the kind of being we're looking for. And that is why you'll see that most deists and theists alike will align themselves to this God. The singular, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, all-powerful God. Now, even then, I don't think many people will have an objection to this. Obviously, they'll have maybe their own theories, their own naturalistic or worldview. But I noticed that this view of God doesn't really garner an emotional response from most people. Because all you've proven is that, well, okay, fine, this universe really was designed by some infinite, timeless, spaceless, eternal, all-powerful, all-wise being. Cool. But what effect does that have on us now? Like, why should we care? Like, okay, cool, yay, we discovered the origin of the universe. Now what? How does that affect our everyday life? The answer to this question is what provokes the emotional response for so many people, and is the main reason why theists and atheists and anti-theists have been debating for hundreds, if not thousands, of years.